Without a doubt, one of the laziest, dumbest, most overused tropes currently plaguing manga is the I got kicked out of the hero's party trope. This trope right here, ooh, it aggravates me because it actually comes from a really great place. It comes from a really great question and line of thought that can lead to some really interesting stories, and yet it is so lazily overused. It is so misunderstood. It is so overindulgent, and it gets basically to the point that it becomes another excuse to write lazy, stupid Mary Sue characters. Ugh, I hate this trope so much. But before I get into why this trope really is honestly horrible, and where it comes from, and how it can actually be used well, and we'll look at some examples, let me quickly bring up the fact that we have a goal for the last 2 months of this year. We are trying to get up to 5,000 subscribers, and this would be a really awesome number to hit because we've had 5 years of activity here on YouTube. We are about to hit 500 videos. Woohoo! Imagine if we could complete the holy trifecta of 555. 5,000 subscribers, 500 videos, 5 years of activity here on YouTube. That would be phenomenal. And if we manage to do it, there will be some prizes and some awesome stuff that we'll be doing for you guys in the future. If you'd like to help us get there, please like, share, subscribe, pass along our videos to other people, especially to other novice authors out there. Help us grow our community. And now, back to this writer's rant. So, the kicked out of the hero's party trope is mostly used for fantasy manga. And that makes sense because of this whole dynamic of the heroes going on this special journey as a collective group, all surrounding one charismatic figure, normally tends to go into the fantasy realm. However, it can be used in all different types of scenarios, as I hope to endeavor to show. Again, usually we mostly see this here in fantasy, but this is a trope that can be used really for any kind of genre. Now, at its heart, this particular trope is meant to ask the question of, what if the underappreciated person within the story, the person who you didn't think was actually the hero, had their chance to be the hero? And what if we then sprinkled in a little bit of tragedy? Oh ho ho! They were good friends with the hero. They thought that they were getting along really well with everyone else in the group. But for some reason, things don't work out, they are kicked out of the group, and then they must go and they must rediscover themselves away from that community, away from those friendships, and then they discover the real potential and heroism that had always been within them, and they discover that they're actually really awesome. This is a really ennobling kind of an idea, and this is something that a lot of people can actually identify with. This trope falls perfectly within power fantasy, where, hey, what if you, dear viewer, were actually super cool? What if you had these amazing powers, skills, talents, relationships? You could be amazing. And sure, because you're reading this, you probably don't have that, but you can live vicariously through this character. And so the I was kicked out of a hero's party trope really plays into this because, hey, guess what, dear reader? Guess what, dear viewer? You seem to be the side character in everyone else's story. But what if you could be the hero? You've been bullied, but you can be awesome. You've been neglected, but you can be awesome. You didn't get the girl or the guy, but you can still be awesome. Why? Because, well, this person right here was kicked out of the hero's party, and they became awesome. Woohoo! That is where all of this is coming from, and it's actually not a bad idea. The problem is in the execution! Because so many of the characters who are put into this particular scenario are quickly put onto the Mary Sue highway of just go on, the story will bend itself around you, you are always amazing, you can do all these incredible things, you're gonna get all the girls, you're gonna get all the guys, you're gonna always win, you have this OP power within you, you just didn't realize this because of how the hero was abusing you and how because everyone else was mistreating you or ignoring you, but you were amazing. everything all the time. And now the rest of the story is just going to be how you continue to increase in powers, how you have all of these amazing abilities, how no one could ever have stood up against you, and how you're now going to have a harem. This is usually where it goes, and it becomes so lazy, so boring, so repetitive, and usually, and even then, it's still an idea that could work, but because they go onto the Mary Sue Highway, where it's more about accumulating powers and love interests, it's never about character development, character arcs. That is where a story shines. You can use any old, boring, overused, stupid trope, and so long as your characters are well written and put into an interesting plot, the trope can actually enhance what you're doing. That's what tropes are there for. They are gears to help the story move along. It's in how you use them. And unfortunately, these gears, especially this gear of I was kicked out of the hero's party, has not usually been put into motion, has not been put into a good conjunction or pattern with engaging characters and an interesting plot. Now, to help give us an idea, and maybe to put you on your own path of trying to better understand this trope, and why it sucks, and yet why there are some really good examples of it, I'm going to look at some examples here of stories that use this trope horribly, or that they probably don't really utilize it to its best. Then there are the okay examples, because there are some stories that actually use it pretty well. I wouldn't exactly give them glowing reviews, but they're enjoyable reads. And then there are those who are like, wow, that is what this trope was always meant for, and I love it. So let's dive on into it right here. And I'm just going to say this, in doing my research for this particular rant, I was really happy to find that there were plenty of other people over the years who have seen this from the same place where I'm coming from, where this is not a bad trope, where people like underdog stories. They like to see where the bullied person becomes vindicated and actually shows themselves to be a real hero. That's one of the reasons why this trope has grown in popularity over time. But as we'll see from my list of examples, just because it's a great idea doesn't mean that it's executed well. So without any further ado, let's dive into my list right here. I already have at the top of my list right here, the hero took everything from me. This right here is a story about how you can get yourself a MILF harem. I actually like the way that this opened up, where you have an isekai individual who's in the party with the hero, who's attracted to older women, gets kicked out of the party because he actually really isn't that special of an individual. And so he goes back home and basically seduces the mom of the hero and gets together and then begins to build a harem of all of the different heroes in the hero's party of their moms. Now then, I actually enjoyed this at first because I was laughing my head off. It was such a silly, dumb idea. And at first, it was actually executed pretty well. I will say this, the first 4 or 5 chapters are actually rather engaging and interesting. After that, it just devolves into absolute harem nonsense, and the hero's party are the biggest bunch of idiots that it actually gets to a point where it's not even gratifying to laugh at the horrible things that happen to them. It's just stupid. And then the world building devolves into absolute nonsense as well. This right here is a story that lost its plot really quickly and just holds on to this trope for dear life as though it's the only thing that can redeem an unraveling, pathetic story. And so this is an instance where it actually had a lot of promise, but was executed so poorly. And then we have this lovely gem right here with a long title, Until the Chore Granting Sorcerer Realized He's the Strongest. I just want to know, especially after reading this manga, and I've read as much as I possibly can, why did anyone think it was a good idea to kick this guy out of the hero's party? This individual, yeah, sure, his special power is to grant buffs. His buffs are amazing. And it takes only one chapter to cement this, and this is where it quickly devolves into the realm of Mary Sue-ness. And yes, you can still be a Mary Sue even if your character is depressed and has no confidence in himself or herself. The reason why this character is a Mary Sue is because, well, it's not just because he's OP, but because the entire plot bends itself to his whims. Grant, based on what we know about his powers, and his powers are really awesome, he's somehow able to defeat massive monsters on his own with 1 or 2 hits? What? How does that work out when he's just like, well, these are just simply buffs. I just give buffs. Buffs do not a very powerful character make. There has to be innate skills and other abilities there. So already the world building is falling apart, and everyone other than the hero's party absolutely loves and adores him, is always tripping over themselves to praise him, to be best friends with him, despite the fact he's like, oh no, I'm just such a pathetic character. It's so grating on the nerves right here. This is absolutely a Mary Sue story right here, and it's so lazy. The action is actually really well done and the art is gorgeous, but the story itself is awful and does not warrant the amount of time you can pour into this manga. And then for the Labyrinth raids of the ultimate tank, Wu gets rid of the powerhouse. Why? This is one of the reasons why I don't like the most uses of the I got kicked out of the hero's party trope. How can you call yourself a hero? How can you call yourself a good leader if you kick out the powerhouse of your team? And this is where a lot of people who are using this trope actually probably have never played D&D, have never played online RPGs where they've had to work with large groups, because you don't do that. You need your healers, you need your tanks, you need your rogues, you need your wizards, you need everyone to make a cohesive team in order to win. Games are made that way, to force you to work together. And that's also the way that life itself works. You can't just cut off your right hand and expect that life is going to get better for whatever dumb reason. That's not the way things work. And so you actually use this to highlight that maybe the hero's an idiot, which some stories actually do very well, but for the most part, most people would know, no, you don't get rid of your tank, no, you don't get rid of your healer, no, you don't get rid of your wizard, because they are essential members of your team. And this is where the trope can get really stupid unless you take your time to build up team dynamics, which most stories will not do, because they just want to get to the good Mary Sue-ness as quickly as they can and have that power scaling wish fulfillment element to their story by showing how this character was awesome all along. Never mind actually taking the time to build up the tragedy of when they are betrayed by the hero and kicked out of the party and what that actually means to them. Ugh. And here's a story that I actually really wanted to enjoy. A female blacksmith who was picked up by a good-natured guild. I actually like the premise of this, where you've got a young girl instead who discovers just how amazing that she is by being kicked out of the hero's party and then finding a guild who appreciates her for her skills. But again, if you have a magical blacksmith who is able to craft S-tier weapons with a couple of stupid strikes from her hammer, never mind actually getting into the intricacies of building a cool weapon, which would be awesome to see. I would love to see that kind of world building. No, we're just going to show one panel in which bam, 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 boom, here's an S-tier weapon. Isn't amazing? And then the prince/hero is like, oh, she just smells of iron ore. I can't stand the smell. I will therefore kick you out of the party. This is stupid! That is so ridiculously dumb on all kinds of levels. It's actually a really great idea. I like the pitch for the story, but come on, the execution is just awful, and the trope then just becomes worn out, overused, overindulgent. Oh man, and I still have more on this list. Next, we have a story about a dragon and a rising adventurer. Again, this is actually something where I kind of would like this story, except why was the wizard betrayed by the hero and the rest of the party? Oh, you're weak. Dude, you're at the bottom of the most dangerous dungeon when you decide to abandon him. The fact that he got down there and didn't die en route means that he's a very good, capable wizard. Why did you decide to sacrifice him then? It doesn't make any sense. Are you stupid? Do you think you're going to survive getting out of the dungeon with less than a full party? You absolute moron hero. And then from there, the wizard makes a contract with an evil dragon. She's liberated. They're, of course, going to get together in a happy, lovey-dovey relationship because plot. And he then becomes uber powerful. Ugh, it's so overly cliche, overdone. I've seen it before, and I've seen it done better. And then I've been kicked out of an S-rank guild, but only I can communicate with dragons. But before I knew it, I became the greatest Dragonite. Just why? For one thing, why name your story something so long? But again, why would any hero kick out a guy who can communicate with beasts and especially with dragons? And then this entire story goes totally antisocial where I will only hang out with dragons and I'm now going to have a harem of beautiful dragon women that are going to give me all of these superpower buffs and I am totally SSS tier capable and blah, 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 blah. It's so overpowered. It's so Married Sue and it's all about accruing your bestial harem. Facilitated by the stupid trope of I got kicked out of the party. There's no creativity to it. Again, the artwork is beautiful, and as someone who loves dragons, I would have thought I would have enjoyed the story, but no, the characters are stupid and the plot is stupid, and it's because it's relying on one dumb trope to get everything going, and it holds on to that of I was kicked out of the hero's party, I am worthless, never mind my amazing powers and my harem of dragons. What is this? And to round off my bad examples, I know I'm going to ruffle some feathers by saying this: banished from the hero's party. The story, the manga, the anime that has the title of the trope is actually stupid. Now then, I will appreciate the idea of a hero who was banished from his party because of misunderstandings, because of machinations and schemes of individuals who are evil. I can get behind that. I like that. And the fact that he then goes and decides to live a completely different life, be a farmer, have a family. You know what? I can appreciate that. And it's not a problem that it's kind of a slow-paced story. It's just that it's kind of screws itself over really quickly by then revealing that no, the hero actually loves him and she never wanted him out of his party, and now this is going to be an awkward love triangle right here as the hero tries to find the protagonist and bring him back after he's found his purpose and the love of his life. And there's actually something interesting here. But the execution, in my opinion, was poor. It did not grip me. Yes, I've gone through the story, and yet it just didn't mesh. And when I look back at it, I'm like, you could have had this story, actually, I think, in a far more interesting way than simply I was kicked out of the hero's party, which I know kind of goes against the title and the trope itself. But I feel like in concept there's a good thing here, but maybe it needs to be done slightly differently. You guys can argue about that in the comments. But now then, let's jump on over to some okay examples of this particular trope, where the characters are actually interesting, and where some good things are done with the plot, and the trope is not actually done poorly. But maybe there's some things that could be fixed in order to make it work better. My first example is Skill Sass. This one I actually really do like. It's just that the world building is kind of ridiculous, and the mangaka has no concept of how the economy works or of how money works. But I will say this: if you want to have a good story where the main character, in this case Rolf, who's kicked out of the hero's party, actually has an interesting character arc and is not OP, I would definitely check out Skill Sass, where the main character is kicked out of the party because his powers do not activate. Everyone's really intrigued. He has the revival power. What could that do? You could do all different kinds of things. But as he comes to find out later on, the revival power will only work on things that have been magically destroyed. And not just that, really. I mean, it does work on things that have not been magically destroyed, but if he wants to revive something that hasn't been magically destroyed, he has to be holding on to someone with the destruction power. So he is severely limited in what he can do unless he finds the other main character, Elsa, who has the destruction power, which is really awesome, except that she can't have physical touch with just about anything unless there are some serious limitations put on her as to what kinds of magical items she has or someone that she can touch, like Rolf. And so I ended up actually enjoying this story despite the world building and the economics being stupid, because the characters had legit limitations. Rolf and Elsa actually have a cute relationship with each other, and Rolf is actually a decent main character. Sure, you could probably make an argument that he's got some Mary Sue tendencies, but overall, the world does not warp itself to his advantage, and he is still kicked about quite a bit by the hero. And that's one of the things that I do enjoy within the manga, is that the hero remains a constant antagonist who is challenging Rolf all the time, taking away Rolf's advantages or forcing Rolf to do something that maybe he doesn't want to do, or pushing Rolf to actually be the hero and not just recede to the back lines where he can live a more comfortable life. And so that antagonistic relationship really helps to push the story forward and helps make Rolf an interesting character by making the hero a somewhat competent antagonist throughout the story. And so that's why I actually do like this. It's just that the world building is so lazy in some cases that it really takes you out of the enjoyment of the overall story. Another okay example right here is Frontier Alchemist, and this is actually an instance where you don't have the main character being kicked out of the hero's party, but you actually have something similar, where the main character, Rust, is kicked out of the Alchemist Guild due to people undervaluing his abilities, but also out of jealousy. And so he's not necessarily kicked out of the hero's party, but it's something similar. And boom, Rust goes on actually a really awesome adventure to go and help to claim and tame the frontier. And there's a lot of really great characters. The artwork is beautiful. The action is fun. There's a lot of really cool things happening in Frontier Alchemist. The problem is that it happens so fast that the pacing does not give us time to actually learn anything about how alchemy works, which alchemy is so cool. You can do so much awesome world building with alchemy, but the pacing is so fast that we don't get enough to really dive deep into this amazing magic system, which the mangaka keeps on flirting with. It's really neat and complex. Well, wouldn't it be nice to see any of that? And then because the pacing is so fast, we don't get enough time to really enjoy many of the characters other than Rust, which is a shame because this is actually a main character who I wouldn't mind if he has a harem option going on right here. I would just like to get to know the girls. I would like to get to know some of his allies. I would like to get to know the villains a whole lot better. But the story just goes so fast that you don't get a whole lot of time to really enjoy any of the side characters. And that's why I would only label this as an okay example of the trope being used, because the trope is executed actually pretty well. It's just that the story itself does not reach its full potential. Now, let's actually get to 3 examples of what I believe to be excellent stories that use the trope of I got kicked out of the hero's party well. We have the Playboy Sage. And I don't like this just because of its abundance of plot, but because this is an excellent story of an OP character. This guy's absolutely overpowered, who wants to change who he is. He wants to be able to change his career. He even wants to be able to change his personality and the way that he is perceived by other people because he was the playboy. And he's realized that he's made some mistakes. He's rubbed people the wrong way. He's made enemies, and he doesn't want that. He wants to move on and be redeemed of the person that he once was. But despite all of that amazing power, it takes a whole lot more to change who you are and to change the hearts of other people. And that's what I really like about the story, is that this is a story of redemption that plays out throughout the entire story, and the characters are engaging. The world is wonky and bonkers. It might take you out of it at sometimes because it's just so over the top. But overall, I actually really enjoy it, and it's a very cohesive, engaging story from beginning to end as far as I've read. And the characters are actually fairly enjoyable to read, very engaging, and it uses its tropes well. And then we have a story that I actually wanted to hate, but it won me over, which was Makin Tsukai no Mato Shonen. And it has a way longer title than that. But this one I thought was really interesting, where you have the assassin who gets kicked out of the hero's party, who then joins up with a demon general who got kicked out of the demon king's ranks. And they decide, you know what? If we're both underappreciated, why not just find fulfillment in who we are? And so this is a journey of self-discovery for two enemies who decide to set aside their differences and just figure out who they are. And it's a really sweet story. I really wanted to hate it because of its tropes, but the characters are written so dang well. And the trope that initiates the story of I was kicked out of the hero's party, continues to come into play in very interesting ways as the hero's party just falls apart, and a lot of the smaller tropes of how these characters normally devolve into monsters really takes its time to play out slowly and in sinister ways that stalks the main characters and causes all kinds of problems either directly to them or indirectly to them, as the hero and his companions do horrible things that mess up the natural balance of the world. You get this really interesting tragedy juxtaposed with the redemption story for the two main characters. And it's written, honestly, so well. I would love to get more updates for this manga because it's gorgeously done. It's got some really good humor, and the characters are absolutely engaging. This is one that I highly recommend, and it's one that definitely uses the trope of I got kicked out of the hero's party to its fullest. Lastly, I want to use an example where I think that the story actually excels at what Frontier Alchemist purports to do, and that is the manga I Was Expelled from the Black Magicians Guild and Picked Up as a Royal Court Magician. What is it with all these long titles? But despite the overly long, obnoxious title, this is a really fun story about a young girl who, just like Russ from Frontier Alchemist, is kicked out of her guild because the people are jealous, they underappreciate her, they think that she's weird, and her personality really doesn't fit in. And she's someone who's been crushed by the realities of the workplace, brushing up against her youthful teenage dreams. And so now, as a young adult who needs to take care of herself and her ailing family, well, she's got to work. And unfortunately, she chose a really bad company, a really bad guild to work for. She gets kicked out. Where is she going to go? She gets taken in by the guy who fell in love with her back at the academy back when they were teens, and he brings her into the royal court to make her a part of the royal guild of alchemists and magicians, and this story just does it so freaking well! Not just because you have fun, engaging characters and a sweet little romance, but you get courtly intrigue, you get actual world building, we understand how the magic works to a much greater level than what you get with Frontier Alchemist, and that was just really awesome. The action is great. The illustrations are gorgeous. It really is the full package, and I would just love to get more of this story because it is so engaging. And again, it's kicked off mostly by the trope of I was kicked out of the hero's party, but what a good story does is it doesn't beholden itself to just one trope. It uses tropes like gears to get the plot moving, but this is a story where it uses that trope to initiate the story, but then begins to tell a completely different story of realizing one's self-worth, and as the main character does, she evolves into a much more competent and much more lovely person. And I like that. You actually get real character development as the story goes along. And this then bleeds on over into some of the romance shoujo elements, but they are actually pulled off really well. Nothing is too heavy-handed. This is honestly a story that I highly recommend. So, I know that I've gone on for quite some time. I had my good rant there at the beginning. I've given you plenty of awful examples of this trope. I've given you some good, and I've given you some okay examples. But here's what I really want to do, rounding this all off. Just remember this. Tropes in and of themselves aren't a bad thing. How we use them can actually be really stupid, but they are the gears that help get the plot moving. If you use an overused derivative cliche trope, then you need to figure out how you can use the plot and the characters, the world building, to make things interesting. Don't just beholden yourself to a trope, which is something that too many people do, because your story isn't a trope. It is an amalgamation of many, many different elements. And if you forget that, then you're not really writing a good story. Furthermore, if you do use this trope, which it can be done well, don't just use it to make your character a Mary Sue. Do not forget character progression. Do not forget how a plot and the different people within that plot need to challenge your character and help them to grow. Your character is not a trope. If you write a character who is a trope, you have not written a character, you've written a living trope, which is lazy and stupid and laughable. So don't do it. If there's anything that is going to crush fantasy manga, it's actually not so much just isekai. I mean, isekai has kind of gone to the point where it is in and of itself now a trope and a hilarious derivative of actually a much more powerful, much more interesting genre as a whole. Portal fantasy, which I'm going to get into in the near future, hopefully, because there's definitely a discussion that needs to be had there. And when I look at it now, I see so many stories that are just basically taking this trope of I was kicked out of the hero's party and are using that as the only real element of their story. It's going to get to the point where it's just been seen so often, people are going to get bored with it. Screw how much people love an underdog story, to the point that fantasy within manga is really going to get set back some ways, because that's the only thing people are doing. Isekai and I got kicked out of the hero's party. There's so much more that can be done within the realms of fantasy. It is a boundless potential and possibility. So do not beholden yourself to one or two tropes, because that is limiting yourself. Get creative. Whew, okay, so I've said my bit right there. I'd like to hear your thoughts in the comments, and thank you for making it this far into the video. This ended up being a way longer rant than I expected, but I just have a lot to say. I've got a lot of feelings about the stupidity, about the use of this one cliched trope. It's overused, it's overdone. But once again, I want to hear from you. Are there examples that I have missed of good, okay, or bad I was kicked out of the hero party stories? Was I wrong in some of my assessment of the ones that I presented right here? Also, if there is another trope that you would like us to tear into and analyze, please let us know in the comments. But otherwise, thank you so much for joining us on this incredible adventure that we call writing. Hopefully you've learned something from this. And if you've liked what you've heard and seen right here, please do us a massive solid and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Like, comment, share out our videos with other people. It would help us out so much. We want to hit 5,000 subs by the end of the year. That would be awesome in order to complete our trifecta of 5s. But otherwise, again, thank you so much for joining us. And until the next video, y'all, tschüss.